All right, chat. We have a new video. Why the US military costs so much. I want you to understand that if the United States spent half of our military budget on the United States instead of these weapons that you're about to see, that would mean all of Build Back Better is funded. And you have an extra $100 billion a year to play around with. That's just half of the military budget. That would be an extra $1 trillion over 10 years to play around with. $1 trillion. High-speed rail crisscrossing the entire country wouldn't cost that much.
Defensive capabilities. They're able to protect their homeland from foreign threats. Iceland's armed forces, for example, comprise 4 ships, 1 airplane, 3 helicopters, and 4 radar stations, all operated by the country's Coast Guard. Beyond a small paramilitary peacekeeping unit made up of volunteers, the nation has nearly no capabilities to deploy abroad. In fact, its constitution doesn't even have a mechanism to declare war. Some militaries build on their defensive capabilities with limited expeditionary posturing, ability to wage a small-scale operation abroad. This requires an expensive mix of training, equipment,
All right, be right back,
and
Chad.
planning.
I need
Whereas domestic
more water.
capabilities can be permanent and stationary, all expeditionary capabilities inherently must be designed to be temporary and mobile. This spans from the ability to fire a missile to the ability to cook up breakfasts, which raises cost and complexity dramatically. For this reason, large-scale expeditionary capabilities are largely confined to the largest, best-funded militaries like those of France, Mexico, or Canada. But then there's the US military. It is in a class of its own. Whereas most nations can defend at home and some can deploy abroad, the US military has a rather singular strategic posture. They have essentially turned the entire world into home turf. Their goal is complete. It's the ability to fight any sort of fight in any location at any moment. To an American, that might sound like the inherent function of a military, but it's a uniquely US approach. Most militaries are merely designed to respond to relevant regional threats and can scale up to wage a war abroad if necessary. To be able to fulfill this all-encompassing mission, the US military has a degree of flexibility and globality unmatched by any other, which incurs a near endless array of exceptional costs for the force. They pay to produce their own private label of chicken tenderloins and ship it all around the world to places like this base in southeastern Turkey because they run a grocery store there, because they have thousands of service members stationed there, because that's where they keep about 50 nuclear warheads in case they decide to use one in Europe, Africa, the Middle East, or elsewhere. They pay for professional sports teams to incorporate patriotic ceremonies honoring past and present service members into their games in order to help boost recruiting to the level needed to staff all their roles worldwide. They pay to develop an occasionally viral bipedal humanoid robot because they believe that in the future they can gain a competitive advantage against other forces by having these robots integrate into their ranks and fulfill the most dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. These costs grow and grow atop each other, then span all around the world. From a spatial and logistical standpoint, covering the globe is nothing less than a monumentally challenging and expensive task. Then there's the temporal component. Making sure that the right soldiers with the right weapons and technology are in the right locations requires a predictive approach and proactive planning. And predicting what future warfare looks like, then preparing for it, is also an extremely expensive endeavor. Take, for example, the USS Freedom, a first-of-its-kind littoral combat ship commissioned in 2008. At just under 400 feet or 120 meters long, what this ship lacks in size, it more than makes up for in design complexity and state-of-the-art technology. This ship represents 2 entire decades of planning and predicting, researching and developing, contracting and commissioning. A nearly inconceivable dedication of time and resources, but one that begins to make sense when considering the expectations. When conceived of in the 1990s, the littoral combat ship was meant to lead the American Navy for the next half-century. With the Cold War coming to a close, the US Navy had found itself over-indexed in warships designed to patrol and battle on the high seas. Suddenly, without a comparable rival, the US was the world's single naval superpower, and its fleet needed to reflect this new order. Now the new preeminent worry was pirates, terrorists, and gun runners zipping along coasts, requiring something nimble, fast, and flexible enough to keep pace in the in-between, the coastal water.
This is all bullshit. I didn't realize this Wendover Productions was going to be defending the US's bloated military. You know what can zip along really fast? A Coast Guard cutter. You know what can zip along? They're very cheap. You don't need to have the littoral combat shit. It's bullshit. You know who else can defend ships? Properly constituted states with their own coast guards. This is nonsense. This is fucking nonsense.
Waters, where threats were diverse and warfare often asymmetrical.
I got a Thai iced tea. Isn't that nice? This is what we call yum.
To fill the void, Navy officials presented two ideas. The DD-21, a larger ship capable of holding its own on tight coastal waters, or what planners called the Street.
Now, if you notice something about the littoral ship, why does it look so weird? This is a radar. This is radar. Radar suppressing features. I don't know much about this program, but my guess is that this was not seaworthy and it underperformed traditional ship.
A smaller, sleeker, and critically cheaper option. From the jump, these Street Fighters were more appealing. They'd require smaller crews, they'd be fast, capable of surprising enemies, they'd be stealthy, and with the advent of new hull
stealthy! Stealthy! Dumb as fuck.
Technology, they'd be light enough to push 45 knots while still having ocean-wide range and carrying a payload. If that wasn't enough to future-proof such a concept, they'd be modular too, capable of switching weapon systems and kits to fit different missions, from surface combat to minesweeping. But still,
so basically this is the Joint Strike Fighter of the Navy. Wow, no wonder it sucks. This is a concept that I'm not trying to pretend. Listen, I took courses in engineering and stuff like that, and I have relatives who were Pentagon planners, and I have a lot of life experiences that are unique to myself that have let me explore these interests with people who know what they're talking about. Okay. But one of the things that you will note is if you go and study the United States in World War II, you will find that in that war, we had a lot of specialized equipment. All right. You had escort fighters. You had close air support planes. You had tactical bombers. You had strategic bombers. You had interceptors. You had, you had heavy fleet carriers. You had escort carriers. You had cruisers. You had light cruisers. You had destroyers. You had frigates. You had battleship. You had a specialization. Same thing with tanks. You would have main battle tanks. You would have heavy tanks. You would have tank destroyers. You would have, a specialized panoply of airframes and vehicles that fit a niche. And the U.S. military in the late 20th and 21st century tried to create these, starting in the 80s under Reagan, these jack-of-all-trade vehicles. And those, for example, right now, the U.S. Air Force is trying to get rid of the A-10. We don't want the A-10 anymore. It's slow. It's not stealthy. They want to replace the A-10 with the F-35. Well, the A-10 is a specialized close air support and attack aircraft. It's not intended to dogfight with other aircraft. It's intended to serve a very specific role. The Joint Strike Fighter is a jack of all trades. It's much more expensive than the A-10. And in that role of close air support, it's less capable. So what the United States military is going to do is replace a specialized airframe that's exceptional at its role, but deficient in other areas, with a jack of all trades vehicle that's much more expensive to run, less reliable, less robust, less effective. So we're paying more for less capability. That's the US military in a nutshell. And if the war in Ukraine has taught us anything, it's that cheap, man-portable weapons are more effective than Wunderwaffe, expensive military equipment. It's guys with javelins. It's guys with NLAWs. It's guys with Stingers that fucked up the Russian military. It wasn't main battle tanks.
By 2000, such a street fighter was just a concept. A concept that the Navy quickly turned over to private contractors after it proved too difficult to actualize in-house. Entering agreements with both General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin.
Yay, private contractors! Cost plus contracts. What does a cost plus contract mean? A cost plus contract is a contract that guarantees your profits. So whatever your costs are, plus a percentage, guaranteed profit. We don't know what the costs are going to be. So that incentivized the corporation to run up the costs.
To each produce 2 ships in 2 separate models, the Navy handed the project off to the private sector, assuming the competition between the two for future LCS contracts would produce a 21st century mainstay. While the daunting scope had begun to add to the price tag, the Navy hoped these ships could come in relatively cheap by shipbuilding standards, somewhere between $150 to $225 million per unit. By 2009, the US had 2 ships, one from each contractor, but not 4, as budget overrun on both models was so extreme that the Navy canceled the contracts for the second of each. What was supposed to be in the 200 millions at most had ballooned to about double the price. The issue was, however, the LCS remained a critical cog in the planned New Age Navy fleet, and they needed to buy a lot more than 2. 56 of them, in fact, or 82, or 63, or 55, or most recently 52, depending on their evolving ship force structure projections. But no matter how many, they needed a lot and needed them fast, as LCSs were expected to replace old minesweepers and outdated frigates. And rather than settling on a single class of LCS as previously planned to incentivize competition, they proposed Congress an alternative, what they called a dual award strategy, offering each company a 10-ship contract over the next 5 years. All the while, the problems with the Navy's current LCSs were already beginning to show. As a general rule in shipbuilding, a ship can have range, it can have speed, and it can have a heavy payload, but it can't have all 3 at once. With speed as a principal mandate, both General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin had to get creative and make sacrifices. While both classes are able to reach an incredible 44 knots, some 10 to 15 more than a typical Navy ship, they made separate design choices to get there. For the Independence class, this meant a unique aluminum trimaran hull. As for the Freedom class, while Lockheed Martin...
Aluminum hull! That's like going into battle wearing aluminum foil as body armor.
Martin went with a more conventional steel monohull. It innovated on the drivetrain side, developing a complicated combining gear that connected the ship's diesel engines with its gas turbines. Both designs were innovative, but both had problems. Aluminum hulls, it turns out, are brittle, and at speeds of higher than just 15 knots or on rough seas, they may well crack. As for the
ship is cracking from sailing. Imagine it got hit with a weapon. This is why I always say the American military is the biggest paper tiger. If we fought a war with China, we would lose so badly I don't, it's insane. We would get absolutely fucking flattened.
Combining gear, well, they were hard to keep running, as the components were buried so deep in the ship that maintenance staff could hardly reach them, and when they broke down, as they did early and often...
Again, this is not in combat. This is not against an enemy. They just can't sail.
They were so complicated that Navy personnel had to wait around for Lockheed engineers to diagnose the problem and come up with a solution. Then there was the issue of survivability. Built as a combat ship, the LCS was intended to reach level 1 survivability.
Hey, Chad, remember when I said that aluminum hull is like going into battle with aluminum foil? Let's see if I'm right about that. China has missiles that can sink an aircraft carrier before their planes are in range. Yes, they have hypersonic cruise missiles, which means they go in excess of Mach 5. Nothing we have can intercept that. Nothing we have can protect against that. Nothing that we have could do anything. If we fought a war with China, our aircraft carriers would basically be useless. They have to stay so far away from the Chinese mainland that they would be out of the fight. So all those 12 aircraft carriers would just be floating coffins and boondoggles.
The ability to continue operations after an underwater explosive attack. In 2010, the same year it pushed for the congressional green light for 20 more of these ships, the Navy conceded that the ships already produced hadn't reached level 1 survivability. And still, it got worse. In the rush to get these ships on the water, no time was taken to ensure that all the ship modules actually worked. When they did get to testing the modules, it turned out they didn't. The anti-submarine warfare module...
I'm sorry, this is fucking based. Honestly, like, I'm starting to think that investing in, like, what American military contractors is ethical because they don't produce any good weapons. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're just really robbing the war machine. It's almost ethical.
Proved unreliable because the ship itself is so loud that the towed sonar can't reliably pick up any other noise.
The ship is so loud! Oh my god, every single submarine. Okay, so why is this funny? Why is this funny? I'm sorry. Okay, so basically, naval warfare operates under, naval submarines operate under two broad categories of sonar collection data. Basically, the idea of how does the submarine know where ships are? There's passive sonar and there's active sonar. Now, passive sonar is you have these really sophisticated microphones on your ship and they're just listening because, I don't know if you know this, but this is basic physics. Sound travels much faster and farther in water than it does in air. So with passive sonar, you could just kind of listen to the noises that are happening. And with sophisticated microphones and analysis technology, you could kind of figure out what type of ship, how far away, what speed it's traveling, and you could identify ships easily. So the louder a ship is, the easier it is for a submarine in passive sonar status to pick up that ship and fire weapons at that ship. Now, active sonar is when you send out a ping. You've all seen a movie with a submarine where they ping. Well, the thing is, when you send out a ping, it also locates you. So what this sonar buoy is supposed to do is listen for other ships and submarines in the water, but the ship it's on is so fucking loud, it blasts its own microphone so they can't hear shit. This is the most useless ship I've ever seen. And small ships like this, frigates and destroyers in particular, are supposed to be specialized for anti-submarine warfare. That's one of their primary purposes, is to serve as screening ships for a fleet to help detect submarines. Now, in naval warfare, there's a specific type of submarine called a diesel electric sub. They're extremely cheap. And the way they operate is They have large battery banks. And when the submarine is running on the surface, or when it has a periscope snorkel, it runs its diesel engines to run the ship and charge the batteries. But then when it's about to go into combat, it turns off the diesel engines and it runs purely off of the electric batteries. So it's nearly silent. Now, American submarines are not diesel electric, they're nuclear, which means that they're always running this nuclear reactor. So they have to pipe in water to cool it. So they're always making a little bit of noise. And so these diesel electric subs, even though they're much cheaper than our nuclear submarines, they're actually very effective in combat scenarios against our military. And they cost very little. Now, there's other advantages to nuclear submarines that we could get into, but what I'm trying to say is this ship is designed to lose a war to China. This is like, if you were like, design me a ship to lose to a war with China, it would look like this.
Similarly, the Mine Countermeasures mission package, which relies on onboard sensors and an unmanned influence sweep system, has been plagued with delays, breakdowns, and a penchant for causing false alarms. What was supposed to be an endlessly customizable ship, capable for surface combat, submarine hunting, and minesweeping, has effectively been rendered just a gunship that can't take a hit. Regardless of these varying limitations, as of
a gunship that cannot take a hit. Bro, this is worse than a World War II era ship. This thing sucks. And this cost $360 million! This is where our money's going, and neither the Democrats nor the Republicans ever questioned it. They never stopped this. This is what you need to understand about our fucking country, is that we are literally have hundreds of thousands of people living out on the streets. Millions of children every year are homeless for at least part of the school year. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of school lunch debt. We have roads that are falling apart. We have no railroad system. Most major cities have almost no public transit. Our country is a complete basket case. We could be the world leaders in renewable energy. There's no country in the world that is better positioned for renewable energy of our equivalent size than the United States. We have some of the windiest plains in the world. We have some of the sunniest deserts in the world. We have a huge hydrological base for hydroelectric dams. California has some of the best geothermal potential in the universe that we're aware of. And the United States of America is doing none of that. America was literally connected and built on railroads, and we have the worst railroads of any developed country. In the city with the best public transit, New York City, their subway was built in like 1899. What the fuck is going on? I don't want to. Oh, I'm sorry, chat. It was 1904. Not 1899. I'm sorry. I wanted to correct my error. Operation of the subway began on October 27th, 1904. I'm sorry. I lied. I said 1899. It was 1904. I was 5 years off. When did they start building it? It says the first underground line opened on October 27th, 1904. Fucking embarrassing.
In 2023, the US Navy has purchased 30 LCSs. They've broken down at sea, they've bumped into walls of the Panama Canal, they've spent a winter stuck in an iced over St. Lawrence River, they've run a handful of minor missions, and they've averaged about $500 million per ship to build. For a ship that was supposed to be the future, the Littoral combat ship has proved nothing short of a disaster. A reality the Navy—
This is just chat. There is a comedy that we sometimes touch on whenever we're talking about military procurement on my stream. What other stream could talk about military procurement with any kind of intelligence? There aren't any. We talk about this very famous comedy from HBO about the Bradley fighting vehicle. And the Bradley fighting vehicle, it's called the Pentagon Wars. And it is about a book. Basically, the Bradley fighting vehicle was just like the Littoral combat ship. Another boondoggle that can't do anything right, but costs a hell of a lot of money. Let me see if we can find a let me see if I can find a good clip.
I wanted more realism than Army testing was accustomed to providing.
You want realism?
General, you are out of order.
Madam Chairman, in the interest of resolving some of the issues presented here today, I'd like to say something.
Please be brief, General.
Of course.
We already watched it, Wheezy Keezy.
Colonel Burton wants more realism. So let's talk about the real world for a moment. The real world has enemies in it. There are forces at work, even now as we speak, with one objective in mind: the destruction of this country. We must not. We will not allow those forces to prevail, for if we do, you can be certain that you and I and everyone else will never again enjoy the luxury of meeting in this building to debate anything. As I said at the outset, we are in the business of winning. That takes teamwork.
General, the teamwork you so prize, I take it was in full force during the development of the Bradley fighting vehicle?
Textbook.
Perhaps you'd like to tell us how much has been spent so far to develop the Bradley.
How much?
Well, you have the figures, don't you?
Of course.
The Bradley was never designed to be survived an anti-tank rocket. It's the name of anti-tank. The Bradley is the infantry fighting vehicle. Also, the guy wanted to completely destroy the test vehicles, reduce the ability to gather data. The movie is completely wrong. You are listening to propaganda from a YouTube channel and from military contractors. They were covering up the deficiencies in the product so they could sell it. There is a revolving door between the generals that supervise contracts and the contractors. When senior generals retire, they go and work for the military contractors they were overseeing. And they get paid millions of dollars. It's a procurement, a revolving door. And specifically what the Air Force colonel was testing was the idea that even if a light RPG hit the Bradley, it would cause the aluminum armor to burn, poisoning the entire crew instantly. Because burning aluminum is toxic. So even if the weapon wasn't a anti-tank missile, but rather a light RPG, the Bradley fighting vehicle was so unsafe that in any combat situation, it would burn the crew and asphyxiate the crew to death. All right, this is not the, this is not the clip I wanted. Fuck. There's funnier clips. This is like at the end of the movie.
I don't get it.
What?
That.
It's the Bradley.
Well, if that's the Bradley.
By the way, in case you're wondering what we think of the Bradley, we're replacing it. The Bradley was basically a death trap in Iraq. Any kind of IED would pop its top. So the Bradley was basically a death trap.
Then what's this?
What's the date?
1968. The question is, how did they get to that? From this.
We're just gonna watch this. Fuck it, it's 7 minutes.
Gentlemen, our mission was to design and implement an infantry transport vehicle that would be a worthy replacement for the M113 armored personnel carrier. We have met that objective and then some. The Bradley armored personnel carrier will bring troops to a combat zone swiftly, efficiently, and safely. It will hold 11 men, plus a driver, and features a 20-millimeter cannon, which will provide ample firepower and at the same time flexibility. Lightly armored, speedy, and solidly engineered, our troops will be arriving at the battlefield in the very finest American technology has to offer. And at $1.5 million per, a real bargain.
Nice work, Colonel.
Outstanding. Damn impressive.
Well, this is all well and good, Colonel Smith, but...
Something wrong, General?
Well, with this gorilla in production, I don't suppose there's going to be anything left in the budget for my scout.
Doubt it, Bob.
You don't need scouts. You have radar, air recon, satellites.
You always need a scout. And you know what I'm thinking? Why couldn't this thing serve as a scout?
But it's a troop carrier, General.
But this is a speedy vehicle. Why can't it be both?
Well, for one thing, it's too big. And for the other, you can't really see out all that much from inside.
Sounds like a design flaw to me.
Design flaw? No.
No, we'll just stick a turret on top with lots of opticals.
But then, sir, it'll be even bigger.
Well, what's your problem, Smith?
Well, the thing is, General, it's kind of hard to do a sneak and peek when you're over 10 feet tall.
He's got a point, Bob.
Well, all I know is we need a scout. This is fast enough to do the job, and it's funded.
Well, actually, we're a hair over budget.
You turn. And how about some?
Oh no, this is edited down. Oh no, this is edited down really shittily. This guy did a terrible job editing. Fuck. Give me a second. They keep like editing shittily. Okay, this is better.
I don't get it.
What?
All I know is we need a scout. This is fast enough to do the job, and it's funded.
Well, actually, we're a hair over budget.
You turned the Bradley into a scout. We're going to be selling them off to some El Presidente de Chimichanga in no time.
Anything for surveillance ends up south of...
Hey, Presidente Chimichanga. He's referring to all the dictatorships we funded in Latin America. You know, all the military death squads.
the border before the paint even dries.
When you needed that anti-aircraft gun, who backed you up on that?
You did, Bob.
And who testified to appropriations on behalf of that gun?
You did, Bob.
I'm talking to appropriations next week. Now, do I sell you on my Scout or do I not?
You did, Bob. And how about some portholes along the side for individual firearms so the fellas can stick out their guns and shoot people?
Good. And you know what, Colonel? We already have the turret. We ought to get the biggest bang we can up there.
I'm sorry, bang, sir?
You can't hurt anybody with that pansy-ass gun. Add on some firepower.
Where am I supposed to fit the extra ammo?
I don't know. Can't you just shift things around? Make some room.
You already got 4,400 rounds of machine gun ammo. Now you want to add 25mm shells.
General wants his ammo.
He can't have his ammo, unless he runs alongside this thing carrying it.
Well,
Chinese trolls make jokes about Vietnam, but after Vietnam left America, China and Vietnam fought each other at the urging of the United States, I'll have you know, because of what was known as the Sino-Soviet split. There was a rivalry between the Soviet Union and China. Basically, China thought that when Stalin died, there was a reorganization within the Politburo, and they a lot of the anti-Stalin forces within the country took over, and they kind of like paraded crimes that Stalin supposedly committed to the world to kind of attack Stalin's credibility in history. And China didn't agree with that. Mao thought that that was fucked up, and he had a diplomatic split with the Soviet Union. So the Sino-Soviet split happened. So the United States, to weave a wedge between the communist countries of Asia, pushed China to do dumbass shit. One of which was fighting Vietnam because we were sore over getting our asses beat. Well, Vietnam, fresh off of kicking our ass, kicked China's ass. And then Vietnam stopped the genocide in Cambodia. Vietnam invaded the Khmer Rouge, opposing that disgusting Pol Pot genocidal freak regime that America supported, by the way. So it's really funny when you hear anti-communists going, man, Pol Pot. Meanwhile, Pol Pot was supported by the United States. So yeah, Vietnam, using the United States to assert its own interests, pretty normal. Doesn't mean the U.S. is good. Vietnam is confident after beating our ass so embarrassingly that they'll be able to keep us at arm's length.
Squeeze it in?
No.
Oh, come on, just squeeze it in.
We're not trying on Levi's here, Colonel.
Cambodia?
Are you telling me that in a vehicle this size you can't find room for a few rounds of ammunition?
Not in its current configuration, no, sir.
So the configuration's wrong. There must be something you can dump.
Dump, sir?
Something you don't need.
General, the interior is very spare. Besides the ammunition and the men...
Maybe you can leave one of the fellows behind. Put the ammo where the men go.
Sir, it is a troop carrier.
So? Make a couple extra trips. What's the difference?
They want a transport that doesn't carry men and a scout that's got a cannon as big as a tank's on it.
And portholes.
Oh, great, portholes. So the guys can shoot at whatever they can't hit with their cannon.
You don't have to buy the damn thing, Jones. Just draw it. That's one hell of a cannon.
That's a problem.
Why?
You go out in a battlefield with this pecker sticking out of your turret, and the enemy's gonna unload on you with all they got. Might as well paint a big red bullseye on the side.
But it's a troop carrier, not a tank.
Do you want me to put a sign on it in 50 languages? I'm a troop carrier, not a tank. Please don't shoot at me.
This was gonna be so beautiful.
That's good work, Smith. Looks perfect to me.
Thank you, sir.
Thing is,
Yes, General?
looks a little like a tank with that cannon on top. Probably gonna draw more fire.
Actually, sir, that has come to our attention.
We know it's not a tank, but will the other side?
I guess we could always thicken the armor, toughen up the hide a bit.
Colonel Smith, could you explain why you put those portholes there?
Yes, sir. As per your request, so the men could shoot out at the enemy.
You're joking, aren't you?
Besides, portholes? What are we in now, the Navy? Say, you think you could make this thing amphibious? You know, get the troops across a river?
No. No, sir. No. No.
Evil Cookie Dough, thank you for the prime.
Amphibious? The Bradley's supposed to swim?
In theory, at least.
Amphibious troop carrier / scout.
/ tank.
Couple more months, I bet they can get this thing to fly.
What's this in the margin? Please help me. I am losing my mind. RLS.
Lieutenant Colonel Robert Laurel Smith, Head of Oversight and Development.
Pentagon Wars is the movie.
This thing's got an aluminum skin.
Huh?
Anything an enemy tank fires at is gonna go through it like a hot knife through butter.
We're doing the specs on using steel rather than aluminum. Of course, steel is much heavier than aluminum, so it won't go as fast.
No, we can't lose speed. We lose speed, it won't work as a scout vehicle.
It won't keep pace with the M1 tanks either.
Thicker armor's a reactive measure. Let's think proactive here. I say equip the thing with anti-tank missiles. Then it can blast those enemy tanks before they get a chance to fire. What do you think, Colonel?
Fine.
Anti-tank missiles?
I don't know.
Where do I put them? The men will have to wear the missiles as hats.
I don't know, Jones. That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Colonel, there's no room. We're not talking
About
about...
a pair of Levi's. I know! God damn it! What we are talking about is 11 years with nothing to show for it. Except an ulcer the size of the District of Columbia and a career that's on permanent hold. You see this? I've been a bird colonel so long, I swear I'm growing feathers. Now, if you have to design hats to hold those goddamn missiles, then just do it.
So this is how the U.S. military actually operates. I know it's a joke, but this is truly how it is. You have a bunch of careerists, bureaucrats, and they have a blank checkbook. And there is a revolving door between, once you become a general or a colonel, you have this constant carrot of when you retire at 25 or 30 years, you're going to be 45, 50 years old. You've got at least 15 years left to work, if not 20. You could spend your second career as a senior, as a weapons contractor, as a program specialist, as a person that interfaces with the military, and you could get paid $250, $500, $750, $1 million per year, depending upon exactly how many stars you have when you retire. And so everybody who's in these decision-making processes and these procurement jobs understands that. So they don't have any incentive whatsoever to come down hard on these contractors. They have every incentive to give more and more bloat to these vehicles, because when their career in the government ends, they know they're going to get that cushy job in the defense contractor. And that's the situation we're in. That's why the American military is full of weapons like this that do not work, cost a bundle, and do nothing but pad shareholder weapons contractors' budgets. And when you put these weapons into an actual war like in Ukraine, we were told, you give them Bradleys, give them M1 Abrams, and they're going to liberate Crimea. Except what happened? They ran right into anti-tank weapons. They ran right into minefields. They ran right into trenches, and they couldn't break through because these things are garbage. We're about to see the final form of the Bradley, chat. Remember, this started under LBJ program.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, please. If you'd all just take your seats. Thank you. We are pleased to present a scale model of the new Bradley fighting vehicle. Featuring Scout, troop transport, and anti-tank capabilities, It carries 6 men.
How many was it supposed to carry?
11.
Bradley is outfitted with the most sophisticated surveillance equipment ever developed. It is also equipped with a rapid-fire cannon and an anti-tank rocket launcher.
Which means it's loaded with
1,500 shells and 10-tow anti-tank missiles.
So in summation, gentlemen, what you have before you is
a troop transport that can't carry troops, a reconnaissance vehicle that's too conspicuous to do reconnaissance,
And a quasi-tank that has less armor than a snowblower, but has enough ammo to take out half of DC.
Fantastic.
Congratulations, General Smith.
General?
Hell of a job.
General.
Let's build it.
They're building it?
This is what we're building?
So going back to the littoral combat ship, which is basically the same thing except for the Navy. It's a shore patrol vehicle too loud to patrol the shore. It's an anti-submarine vehicle that is incapable of detecting them. And it is a... it's a combat gunship that can't take a single hit. So if you want this vehicle, chat, if you want the Pentagon Wars, here's a link to the video that we just watched. By the way, speaking of things that are worth money, I just realized we're over 3 hours and 45 minutes into the stream. I started on time this morning. So where is your subscriptions? Your subscriptions need to be on time. That means subscribing at tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 sub. If you have Amazon Prime, attach it to your Twitch account. You get 1 free sub a month. That's your Twitch Prime sub. You could also support the stream by giving bits and direct donations by going to !donate. And last but certainly not least, you can gift subscriptions to the community. There's a lot of people here who are working paycheck to paycheck. They're parents of young children. They're college students. They are on a fixed income because they're retired or disabled, or they're just struggling to make ends meet. But nonetheless, the single best way for us to grow leftism in America is to get working class people and young people and marginalized people involved in politics. So those people that are here in my community that are part of those marginalized groups, but who do not have the means to support the stream, if you do have those means, you must assist. By supporting this stream during a hype train, which we have right now, you boost it in the algorithm. We get recommended to more people who would be interested in having a leftist political views on Twitch supported. You also help all those people that are part of our community who can't afford to see it by gifting subscriptions. You help ensure that they get to see this stream uninterrupted. And let me tell you, chat, ads are bullshit. I hate them. I fucking hate them. So you help this stream grow by providing us a robust base of support to build on. By subscribing to this channel, you give me the opportunity to speak the truth without fear, to give you my analysis without holding anything back, because I'm not dependent upon advertisers. I'm not dependent upon corporate media. I'm not dependent upon the Democratic Party liking me. I get to tell you the cold, hard truth about how our country operates, how the Democratic Party operates, and what we need to do to hopefully change it. I have never been prouder than seeing what so many people on this website have done with the space we have created in the face of the genocide in Gaza, in the face of Joe Biden betraying his entire platform to suck up to Republican scum. We are changing the political dynamic, not here alone, but amongst the left online. We are changing the views of the generation. Views that were previously thought impossible are growing in strength. The pro-Palestine movement was dead 15 years ago. I was here. I remember. Now, the vast majority of young people agree. Today, over 80% of Democrats are calling for a ceasefire. We are seeing phone calls, letter writing, text messaging, protests, pressuring the Democratic Party everywhere they are to support a ceasefire. Every single day, another major Democratic official or editorial board or nonprofit institution joins with the next generation that exists here and calls for a ceasefire. If we end the genocide in Gaza, it's not just because of me. That would be insanely ridiculous. But part of the movement that we are building online for alternative media. It's literally working. Biden's approval rating is cratering. And where is it cratering the most? Among young people and people of color. Our generation represents a change. If you're looking for hope, in the future, look at our generation. Look at the younger generations. They are standing up for things that are right. They are saying to corporate media, cable news, fuck you, lying sacks of shit. And don't think for a second that those institutions are not going to fight back. So by supporting this stream, supporting this community, joining in, and here's the most important thing. It's not just giving me money. Obviously, I want you to give me money. It's going to me. It's about what we do here, which is don't just entertain you, not just educate and edify you, but get you involved in your own politics. Literally, thousands of people have joined DSA because of this stream. People have run for political office. I've had people become campaign managers of successful campaigns to be elected to state legislatures. We've elected city councilors. We've elected people to positions of actual power. So we're not just going to be content with reacting and educating ourselves. We are going to get involved in politics where we are and be the change. I have seen dozens of members of our community on picket lines, in protests. Every day, somebody tells me that they got involved because of the efforts of not just this stream, but Hassan's stream and the online left in general. We are turning what is an important movement online into boots on the ground. Money in pockets of organizers. People are organizing at Starbucks, at Chipotle. They're taking over major American labor unions for the left. That starts with organizations and places and communities like this where we can organize. All right, let's go back to why American military budget is so bloated. I got a call from DC to tell my rep, Swalwell, that they want to say I support Israel and not call for a ceasefire. What the fuck? LW do. No sub till tub. By the way, chat. Today is Friday. I just remembered. Friday equals movie night. We get together at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific to watch a movie together. And then discuss it leftistly. So if you need something to do tonight, you want to chill, or you're planning on staying in because you got COVID or something, come hang out on the Discord. We watch movies every Friday. We have over 8,000 leftists in the Discord community. It's a really great place to hang out. You also can provide me information you want me to look at in the news content suggestion section of the Discord. I take a look at that every morning for topics that people want me to discuss. So come hang out in the Discord. I won't be there, Mike. I have a date. Why do you come on the internet and lie? You come on the internet and you tell lies. All right, everybody, let's keep going. Thank you for supporting the stream. We got a level 5 hype train. Incredibly awesome. Thank you. Let's continue.
Navy's finally begun to come to grips with by decommissioning or working towards decommissioning 9 of the vessels. The LCS, by all...
You're decommissioning them already? If you want to understand how insane that is, some Navy ships stayed in service for over 50 years. I didn't even know about the decommissioning. I haven't been following the littoral combat ship much. I just know it's a huge boondoggle.
Metrics has failed to live up to its...
I'm more into aviation, chat, than I am into naval shit. I could talk about the F-22 or the F-35 till I'm blue in the face.
Lofty billing, and it has failed publicly and expensively. But it's far from the only decades-long development project that's fallen on its face. Boeing Sikorsky won the contract to build the Comanche helicopter in 1991, but after a decade of work and $7 billion being poured into the project, only 2 prototypes ever actually left the ground. As for America's first stealth destroyer, the Zumwalt, its gun system has yet to prove the range it's promised, its missile system can't hit targets consistently, and its guided shells cost a prohibitive $800,000 per unit. With similarly high hopes as the LCS, the Zumwalt project was eventually cut after only 3 ships were built. Then, most famously, the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter, adaptable, future-forward, state-of-the-art, has seen one technical glitch and one busted budget after the next for 2 whole decades, its cost ballooning to 89% over what was initially predicted. And the list goes on with countless other smaller, multi-billion-dollar projects. To a certain extent, such mistakes and miscalculations
The
make sense
F-35 costs more than all student loan debt.
To invent the future of warfare. Expensive swings and misses are part of the development process. But it wasn't always this way, and increasingly, it seems the swings have gotten bigger and the misses more frequent. When the Department of Defense wants a ship or a plane or a weapons system built, there's a select group of 5 companies it typically turns to. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics. Excluding Boeing, all these companies earn the majority of their revenue from US or allied military contracts, which only have...
Boeing makes the majority of its revenue barely by selling major jumbo jets. Now, here's the thing. Boeing is basically a department of the US State Department. The US State Department goes around and offers governments all sorts of goodies and subsidies as long as they promise to buy Boeing jets. So buying Boeing jets is a way for a country to make friends with the US. So it's basically foreign policy as well.
Approval of the US. But even excluding foreign defense revenue, 71% of Lockheed Martin revenue, for example, comes from the US government. That translates to $47.5 billion a year. Put another way, Lockheed Martin is given more by the US government each year than NASA.
Isn't this fucking sad?
A major government.
Isn't this fucking sad? Think about all the amazing stuff that NASA has developed that have fundamentally changed our world. And it gets less than 1 defense contractor to build weapons. I'm not even saying that NASA will be profitable. But there are there's a few things that could legitimately kill humanity. One of them is an asteroid impact. And we spend almost nothing on that. Even though the more we spend and the earlier these rocks are detected, the more plausible it is to actually deflect them and save the Earth. We spend almost no money on that foreseeable threat, which we know has wiped out species in the past. But we spend far more money on made-up wars with what? China? What exactly is the threat to the United States? There's no fucking threat. There's not a legitimate threat on the planet toward the United States that we do not completely deter with existing weapons.
Agency. In fact, if the defense contractor was a government agency, it'd be the 24th largest. It gets more money.
Bigger than the Small Business Administration, the Federal Communications Commission, the National Science Foundation.
From the US government than the majority of government agencies. But unlike agencies, thanks to this business, Lockheed Martin profits nearly $1 billion a month. But war wasn't always such a profitable venture. Technology was what brought the private sector to battle. Whereas in centuries past, militaries were primarily defined by human might, the advent of airplanes marked perhaps the biggest instance yet of a non-military technology that could be used to gain a militaristic advantage. During and after World War I, a number of fledgling aerospace companies gained modest contracts with the US military, contributing to annual overall production counts in the dozens or hundreds. But then came World War II. Suddenly, the US and its allies needed as many planes as they could get, and with that, the US government started awarding colossal contracts to anyone who could build an aircraft. Lockheed, Goodyear, McDonnell, Douglas, Boeing, Hughes, Grumman, Northrop, Vought, Convair, and more. While all these companies had existed in some form prior, the war was, for all intents and purposes, what established them. McDonnell, for example, went from 15 employees to 5,000. Hughes went from 4 to 80,000. As a sum, whereas in the 6 years leading up to the war, the US built a mere 20,000 aircraft, during it, the country's manufacturers produced a massive 300,000. But then the war ended, and this was bad for business. Aircraft manufacturers immediately struggled. Some shifted towards civilian aviation, others refocused on auto manufacturing, others still consolidated, while the US government searched for contracts that could be used to keep this new industrial sector, which played no small part in the Allied victory, afloat. Rather quickly, though, a new conflict emerged: the Cold War. In its early days,
Wow! It's almost like Eisenhower warned us about this.
Arose that the Soviet Union had produced an inconceivable quantity of long-range bombers. As the world had now entered the nuclear age, this massively concerned American media, the public, and ultimately Congress.
It was the Soviets. They're the ones who did the aggression, not us who dropped nuclear bombs.
Believed that their newfound enemy could straight up eradicate the US. In response, Eisenhower ordered an immediate ramp-up of American bomber production and agreed to a Lockheed proposal to develop the U-2 high-altitude surveillance aircraft. It would fly over the Soviet Union undetected.
Hey, violated the Soviet Union's airspace. That's a act of war.
At least theoretically, and get a definitive answer to just how formidable their bomber fleet had become. The answer was not much. It was a mere fraction of what had been speculated, but
Oh, they were lying the whole fucking time! Oh, it turns out the Soviets weren't a big hostile enemy after all. It turns out it was a fucking lie! Who knew?
Lockheed and other manufacturers had already cashed their checks, so the answer meant little to them. A near identical story.
The answer meant little to them. And now you understand the American military-industrial complex in a nutshell. How could we lie? How could we cook up bullshit so that we could spend taxpayer dollars and not have it spent here at home?
Emerged just a few years later with missiles. The Soviets had launched Sputnik, and the Democrats of the era used the event to propagate a narrative that Eisenhower and his Republican Party were falling behind Soviet.
Propagate a narrative? The Soviet Union was ahead of us in peaceful space technology. That's objectively true because they funded education and engineering. And they did it to women as well as men. Do you know in the Soviet Union there was no gender gap in the sciences at all?
Technological development. John F. Kennedy, in the run-up to the 1960 presidential election, latched on to inflated estimates of Soviet missile capabilities leaked from the Air Force and started to make the perceived imbalance a central part of his campaign. He argued that his political foes were ignoring this threat, and the American public believed him. Even after having received definitive evidence to refute this fact, he continued the rhetoric. It was just so useful politically, which contributed to an acceleration of US missile development. This was a much-needed windfall for US aerospace companies given the waning need for high-volume aircraft development. It was this very incident, in fact, that precipitated the first use of the phrase military-industrial complex in Eisenhower's farewell address, where he warned of the phenomenon's danger. The subsequent escalation of the Cold War kept the defense industry alive and kicked off an era of growth as US military spending started to consistently increase, but then the wall.
Here's an example. Here's an article just really quick. Did the USSR top the US on gender equality in science? Valentina Tereshkova's famous flight to space in 1963 became a striking symbol of the Soviet Union's commitment to gender equality, heralding that Soviet women were indeed on equal footing with men to advance science, culture, and the arts. Meanwhile, it took another 20 years for the first US woman, Sally Ride, to enter space in 1983. The Soviet Union was ahead of other countries at the time on many key measures of gender equality, such as female labor force participation and representation among scientific researchers. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, when you look at this here, let me give you even more. Let me even give you even more. Hold on. Between 1962 and 64, 40% of chemistry PhDs awarded to the Soviet Union went to women. But that's not to say, and that you can still see that today. Let me see if I can get that. Here's from The Economist. While half the scientists in some Eastern European countries are women, the Soviet legacy is part of the reason. Eastern Europe. Okay, so science is still a man's world. Since 1903, when Marie Curie first won the Nobel Prize, almost 600 blokes, but only 19 women have taken home the coveted award in physics, chemistry, or medicine. In the realms of more ordinary talent, just 28% of the world's researchers are women. Even in the EU, where sexes are more equal, a mere 2/5 of science and engineers are women. In Germany and Finland, it is less than 1 in 3. Eastern Europe bucks the global trend. Communist regimes pressed both men and women into scientific careers and did not always give them a choice about it. Become an accomplished scientist or die! Become an accomplished scientist or I'll kill you! The evil Soviets.
Came down. With no more Cold War, the DoD warned contractors of massive cutbacks in spending. This kicked off a feeding frenzy of consolidation and acquisition as the industry prepared to weather what they believed would be the first sustained period of peace in their existence. Defense spending did decrease, but only slightly and only for a moment.
Hey, when the Soviet Union fell, man, we didn't have a major enemy. Oh no! Oh, well, never mind. Hey, defense spending was going up already. This is years before 9/11. That's odd.
9/11 and the ensuing wars quickly returned the US to the historical trend of near perpetual spending build. And today, with these wars largely wrapped up, the new most popular justification for military spending is growing Chinese military might. Now, many of these supposed threats.
Okay, that chart's not even right. Why is this chart wrong?
Might.
Why is this chart wrong? Let's fact check his chart real quick. Sorry about that.
Justification for military spending is growing Chinese military might.
Okay, so he has around 700 billion in 2023. Let's take a look at that. According to Google, The Department of Defense had 1.52 trillion distributed among its 6 subcomponents in fiscal year 2023. The DOT Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2023 provided 797.7 billion in discretionary spending. This is an increase of 69.3 billion from fiscal year 2022. So wait a minute. How come his chart shows it 100 billion less? Why isn't it up here? This is also this is adjusted dollars, I guess. In 2019 dollars. So this is because of inflation. Is that what he's trying to suggest? I didn't notice that until just now. But I mean, even if we adjust that, the pace of increase in defense spending is still faster than inflation. The 2024 budget request of 842 billion for the DoD. That's a 26 billion over fiscal year 2023 and 100 billion more than fiscal year 2022. This is Biden. This is Biden. Thank God I voted for a Democrat. Am I right? Thank God we voted for a Democrat. Am I right? It was $600 billion under Trump. Now it's $850 billion under Biden. In case you're wondering where the Build Back Better went. That's where Build Back Better went.
Now, many of these supposed threats may be legitimate, but it's tough to know with confidence because the defense industry, its lobbyists, and politicians are incredibly effective at shaping public discourse. In fact, the vast majority of the top think tanks are funded, at least in part, by defense contractors. These same think tanks are what are used by politicians and the media as supposedly expert justification for funding to counter new emerging threats. Ignoring for the moment the more unknowable question of whether warmongering for the sake of defense industry profits is effective in practice, it's undeniable that the incentive structures are certainly there. But perhaps the best evidence for this phenomena's influence is the fact that, inflation adjusted, today's military spending is approaching World War II levels despite no active US involvement in any major conflicts.
Fucking weird. Wow, it's so weird. Can you imagine? Can you fucking imagine? These fucking rats, man. Look at the trillions of dollars of waste. Think about what we could have if this money under this curve was actually spent on something worthwhile.
Of course, one can still debate whether this level of spending is justified by the present geopolitical landscape, but what's undeniable is that taxpayers are getting less and less for their money. There was a time when defense spending had undeniably massive downstream effects. The US military was a major financial force behind the development of world-changing innovations like nuclear technology, GPS, and the internet. In fact, in the 1960s, a full third of the entire world's research and development funding came from US defense-related spending.
Research and development for weapons. Yay! Imagine if we spent that on extending our life or curing diseases or traveling space or increasing communications or metallurgy or anything. Maybe less people would die of cancer or communicable disease. What if we spent that money on curing tuberculosis or malaria in the entire world? What if we ended yellow fever? What if we decided to end all tropical parasites? What if we spent that money on infrastructure for the world or ending our dependence on climate change? Or a dependence on fossil fuels, saving the world from climate change? But no, we're going to try to spend it on billions on the Littoral Combat Ship and the F-35, neither of which work.
But today, that share has shrunk to a mere 3%, and what was once perhaps the most innovative force in the world has become downright bad at it. The US auto industry, for example, has quickened its pace of development. It now gets a car to market faster. The US commercial aircraft industry has trended slightly slower, yet in the realm of military aircraft, something dramatic has occurred. What used to take 3 or 5 or 7 years now stretches into decades. A key part of the problem is that the government has taken the inefficiencies of the public sector and pushed them into the private sector where they can be profited upon.
Neoliberals are incredible. Neoliberals are incredible. That's all that private sector does. They don't innovate shit. It's the other way around. It's you've taken the efficiencies of the private sector and sold them off to be profited upon by the private sector. Public sector inefficiency. Jesus Christ. What a fucking neoliberal dipshit.
When developing a new generation of aircraft or ship or anything, the DoD sets strict parameters. That flips traditional incentive structures. Most industries see the private sector innovate in order to create new products that their customers will want. In this case, the customer tells the private sector exactly what they want, and this industry spends heavily on lobbyists, many of whom used to work for the DoD, in order to shape contracts towards what they can build with minimal risky research and development, therefore stifling innovation. But even then,
that's not the public sector's inefficiency, that's the private sector's corruption. Are you okay?
The risk for the contractor is mitigated further because a big chunk of contracts are awarded on a cost-plus basis. That's to say, the government pays for what it costs to build a given technology, then the contractor gets a percentage on top of that as profit. This directly disincentivizes cost efficiency, as the more a project costs, the more the contractor makes. Of course, in normal industries, the contractor would still be incentivized towards efficiency in order to win the next contract, but in this industry, 2/3 of major weapons system contracts, for example, are bid upon by just one company, while yet more contracts are awarded without a competitive bidding process. Perhaps most egregiously, it's well understood that some contracts are awarded to struggling, ineffective companies simply because the US government does not want that company to go bankrupt and therefore for its manufacturing capabilities to be lost. This is perhaps one of the strongest justifications for the spending. The US military cannot afford for Lockheed or Boeing or Raytheon or the other contractors to go bankrupt because they are the only companies in the world capable of producing the technologies that bestow the fighting force with such a technological advantage.
So this is just full-blown cap. This is full-blown cap. First of all, we don't have a technological advantage that's significant. It's at most, we overspend. We overspend. You know who had a technological advantage over the United States and the Soviet Union? Nazi Germany. They had jet fighters in World War II. How about they had rockets that did suborbital trajectories. So what? So fucking what? That doesn't matter. If I have a ship that's twice as good as yours, but you have 10 times the ships, it doesn't matter. If I develop the fastest racehorse, but you've got a fucking car, you win. The United States of America is developing weapons for World War II. What do you think an aircraft carrier is? An aircraft carrier is a fucking joke. It's a fucking it's an Imperial force projector. It's not an actual war fighting vehicle. It's to intimidate poor countries without the ability to resist. An aircraft carrier cannot stand up against one airfield. You put one airfield against one aircraft carrier, the airfield wins. And if you hit an aircraft carrier with 5 rockets or 5 cruise missiles, and you hit an airfield with 5 cruise missiles, the airfield could get repaired within 24 hours. The aircraft carrier is 40,000 dead sailors, Marines, and a multi-billion dollar loss. They're stupid. People think of aircraft carriers as effective because of World War II and the island hopping campaign. That's not any war we're going to fight. There's no island hopping campaign happening. I mean, it's literally a concept for the Pacific War and World War II. Aircraft carriers were basically non-existent in the Atlantic and the European War. They basically didn't even matter. It's fucking stupid.
So, a situation has been crafted where these companies are too important to fail, and they know that, so they can profit off of their necessity rather than their effectiveness.
Nationalize them. Nationalize them. Seize them. Seize all, take over the companies, fire all of the shareholders, and now the government has all those employees in the same positions, doing the same shit, except now there's not a 10% profit guaranteed.
The aforementioned only scratches the surface of the deep web of incentives that keeps the military-industrial complex alive, but at its core, it's as simple as this. It is good for politicians politically and good for contractors economically to create the perception of problems that simply do not exist. No one gets punished when a threat does not materialize. In fact, they can argue that their response, upon which they profited politically or economically, mitigated the threat. Meanwhile, individuals are punished when a threat they argued did not exist materializes, disincentivizing anyone from doing so. Fear is an incredibly powerful emotion, and at its core, the military-industrial complex has created an incredibly effective system to capitalize upon it. As you might have noticed, the last Wendover video is no longer on YouTube. It's a somewhat long and frustrating story, but to summarize, there was a quick clip in it where you could see some personal info on a passport. YouTube's harassment and cyberbullying policy includes a provision against sharing personally identifiable information such as this, and even though it was clearly unintentional, the video was taken down as a policy strike, which seems fair given the wording of this policy. Unfortunately, unlike with most privacy issues on YouTube videos, because this was taken down as a policy strike, there is no ability for us to rectify the issue, even though it could be done with a quick blur, so the video is—
Oh man, did the Israeli government mass report your video and find some technicality to remove it? Wow, Wendover Productions, I wonder why that happened.
Down permanently, at least on YouTube. You see, a couple years ago, some creator friends and I got together to try to both build on the best—
Oh yeah, and then you guys all fired Second Thought. Yeah. Okay, cool. Wendover Productions, everybody. Is military industrial complex just in the US? There are some military contractors in Europe, but they're not nearly as corrupt. The French have some, the British have some, Swedes have some.